Okay, to continue with our discussion of the rhetorical analysis and understanding the rhetorical situation, I've already discussed purpose, and now the second concept in the rhetorical situation that we need to understand is audience. And things that authors do when they write is they write to a specific audience. And so, in order to be able to analyze a piece of writing, we need to understand who the intended audience is. So, for example, in the Abigail Adams piece, which I will reference a lot, it's easy to understand who the intended audience is because what we were reading was a letter. And if you know what a letter is, you know that letters are written by the author to a specific individual. Now, it could sometimes be an organization or whatever, but it's like it's directly addressed to the audience. And so it's not like Abigail Adams wrote to AP language students in the year 2020. Abigail Adams wrote to her son, and AP language students in 2020 looked at it, and we can analyze it and understand how she was effective based on who her intended audience was. So basically, understanding and identifying the audience, we ask ourselves a bunch of questions. So these questions include, whom do you wish to reach? So once again, like I mentioned with purpose, we need to put ourselves in the author's shoes. And when the author was writing this piece, or sometimes, we're always going to be analyzing something that's written, but maybe the thing that we're analyzing was actually something that was delivered in a different way. So we could analyze a speech. And so we'd know that the speech was delivered vocally, and so there might be something that impacted the listeners from it being spoken that didn't come across in the way that it was written. So the thing that I'm thinking is that I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King Jr. The way he delivers that speech, the power and the cadence that he uses, has a more dramatic impact on people than when we read it. Now, most of the time when we read it, we've already seen it, and so we're making those connections. But that's something to take into account as well. Is this a speech? Is it a letter? Is it an essay? Is it, an editorial in the newspaper or whatever? Okay? And when we know all of those things, like the genre of the writing, then we can understand who the intended audience is and how the audience would have been impacted by the delivery of the text that we're analyzing. So some other questions. Whom do you wish to reach? What is the audience's background, education, and life experience? What are their interests? Do I need to keep demographic info in mind? So does race, gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, does that matter when the speech is being delivered or when the text is being delivered? Will political circumstances affect their reading? We could read information in southwestern Utah and get a certain reaction, and when we read that same information in New York City or in certain areas of California, we would get a very different reaction to the same text. And it's not that the text changed, it's that the audience changed. And it was because the political climate in those areas are very different. What does the audience already know or believe about that topic? So that's similar to what's their education level, but it's the same thing. What do they know or believe? Even if the truth is one thing, if the audience believes something different, then the message might have to be delivered in a different way, or an author might have done something specifically because the audience believed something a certain way. So I'm thinking of Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Mark Twain writes a satire about the horrors of slavery, and he sells it to Americans who were trying to overcome the abolition of slavery. That were, I don't mean overcome it, but I mean that were dealing with the effects of the abolition of slavery and the Civil War. And so instead of just going right to people and telling them that slavery is wrong, people already believed that it was right. So regardless of whether it's right or wrong, those people believed it. And so what Mark Twain did is he wrote in a way that satirized the way people thought about slavery, and that was the way that he was able to deliver his message effectively. Some other questions. What is the relationship with the audience? So, for example, right now I'm speaking to you. So if we were doing an analysis on this, my role, my relationship to you is I'm your teacher, not your peer. And so you listen to what I say with more weight than you do when your friends talk to you. I hope you do. But if it was another student talking to you, you might still listen to them, but they don't carry the same weight because they're not a superior to you. And so the author's relationship to the audience does have an impact. There's a speech, President Kennedy, we might analyze a speech that he gave, but because he's the president, it carries more weight because he's the leader. Whereas if it was, the person walking down the street who decided to stand up on a soapbox and start shouting at people, we might not give them the same weight, or definitely wouldn't give them the same weight that we give the President of the United States. Okay, and then the last question is, how can you best appeal to your audience? So when we're analyzing other people's writing and we see some ways that they decided to deliver information, we have to understand, we have to try to think, like, why did they deliver it this way? Who is their intended audience, and why was that the best way to deliver that? And now we see all these other like contextual factors that impact the way that a writer delivers a message that either makes it effective or not effective. So the second key to understanding the rhetorical situation is understanding the audience and how the author can connect to that audience. Thanks.